What's going on, guys, and welcome back to Project Cars 2 and another Ice Track Trials video. Today we're going to be taking 3 different cars down the Mercedes-Benz Ice Track, and I thought I'd start off with a bit of a classic car, so a car from 1984, the Ferrari 288 GTO. Now, I haven't driven this car too much. I haven't driven it in this game at all. Driven it a little bit in some other games, but yeah, not at all in this game, and I wanted to see how it would do on the Mercedes-Benz Ice Track. Last time out we really had 3 pretty new vehicles go down. I mean, we had 2 fairly new cars and then the go-kart, so I wanted to test something a little bit older. This isn't too old, only 1984. We will probably have some older cars go later on in the series. However, I wanted to see, this is a relatively old car, so see how it would go. Now, its rear-wheel drive has about 400 to 450 brake horsepower, and yeah, it is going to be interesting because it's an old chassis, a fairly old chassis, so it's going to be a bit different to some of the new cars and stuff like that, especially with it being rear-wheel drive. I was interested to see how it would do. Now, to be honest, this actually wasn't too bad to drive. It didn't have, I mean, it wasn't too hard to control. Only 400-ish horsepower isn't too bad. I mean, it's still quite a lot of power. You can get a little bit of wheel spin if you're not careful, but this thing didn't really have any issues. It got around pretty well. Even going around the corners wasn't too bad. For an old car, a relatively old car, it does actually corner very nice on the snow, which is quite surprising, to be honest. And yeah, I mean, it was a bit of fun. You couldn't really take much speed around the corners, but you never really can in this series on this course, because especially the road cars, remembering this is a road car, they're running on most likely road tires. They're not going to be running on snow tires or anything. I don't think it changes the tires for the circuits. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's not a vehicle that's exactly made to be driving on this sort of terrain. So all things considered, it actually did pretty well. I felt like it drove pretty nicely. And yeah, once again, I will get to the times at the end of the video. But yeah, the Ferrari 288 crosses the line, and it was a pretty decent run. Next up, I wanted to go for something a little bit newer and a super/hypercar, and I went for the Lamborghini Veneno. I never know how to pronounce this. Now, this is all-wheel drive, which is interesting because I haven't really, well, in the last video we had the Ford Focus Rallycross car, which is all-wheel drive, but that's a Rallycross car, so you expect that to do well. Whereas I was wondering how a car like this would do. Now, the Veneno has, I can't remember, is it like 900 horsepower or something like that? It has quite a lot of power. However, with it being all-wheel drive, it means that it can potentially, grip a little bit better. Now, you still actually couldn't take much speed around the corners. I honestly don't think I was going really any quicker around these corners than I was in the Ferrari. I think because the Ferrari's got a little less power, even though it's rear-wheel drive, it's just a bit easier to, it's a bit easier to go around the corners with because of the less power. Whereas this, it's all-wheel drive, so that's nice, it goes around nicely, but the power kind of puts it down a little bit. So really, these two cars sit at a similar sort of point. So I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean the quicker the car, the quicker they go around here. I mean, I will say right now, there wasn't much of a difference between the Ferrari and the Lamborghini in times. Whereas if you were on a normal on-road circuit, the Lamborghini would absolutely smash the Ferrari's time. But yeah, on here it was actually a hell of a lot closer, because this isn't the sort of vehicle that's really made for this. I'd actually say that the Ferrari was a more suitable car for this track than the Lamborghini. This thing is very low down. It's got splitters, it's got a massive wing. It just doesn't really look like something that you'd see driving around on the snow, does it? Whereas the Ferrari, although you wouldn't really see it driving around on the snow either, it's a bit higher up, and altogether it just doesn't have those really low splitters and bumpers and stuff. So yeah, I mean, the Lamborghini wasn't particularly bad to drive. It was nice to get around the corners and stuff because of the all-wheel drive. But you couldn't really use the speed, apart from right at the end where I put my foot down, went across the line. That's when you could use the speed. And then finally, I had to take a Formula 1 car around this track, and I decided to go for the Formula Renault 3.5. Now, this thing is very interesting. These first couple of corners are terrifying with this car, because they're some of the slowest corners on the track, and when you're going really slow in this car, because I'm using a Logitech G29 wheel, you cannot, like, it's really loose. When you start going a bit quicker around some of these corners here, the wheel kind of stiffens up a bit and it's a bit nicer, but when the car's going really slow at the beginning, the wheel just feels really loose and it slides around like crazy. I mean, you see a big slide there as well. It's really, really easy to get this car to slide, and that is a bit terrifying. Now, this isn't the most powerful thing in the world. I don't think it has much more power than the Ferrari, but obviously it weighs a hell of a lot less. And this thing, you know, we said the Lamborghini was low down. This thing is very low down, and it's got, you know, it's a full-on Formula 1 car, which, let's be honest, isn't really made for driving in snow and ice. Now, of course, acceleration in this thing is pretty damn good. However, you don't really get to use it because you put your foot down a little bit, the car will slide. So I had to be so careful with it that really it doesn't really work that well. However, when you get the corners well in this car, it does go around the corners pretty quickly. Now, there is a really fine line. You'll see there again, I do have a bit of a slide. There's a really fine line between taking some real good corner speed and just having it slide out. It's such a fine line and it's really hard, but when you get it right, this thing definitely goes around the corners quicker than the previous cars. Probably not quicker than the Ford Focus we had out last time, but I suppose it's not to be expected. That was actually a rally car, so it's kind of more suited to this sort of course. But yeah, the Formula Renault was actually, it was terrifying to drive. It was definitely the hardest car to drive that I drove in this video. The other two are actually quite easy, but there we go, across the line with the Formula Renault. So now we get on to the times, and well, our winner for today at least is the Formula Renault 3.5 with a 2 minute 2.020. A lot of 2's and 0's in that time. Yeah, I mean, once again, it's not suited to this track, of course. It's a F1 car, but it can carry a little bit more speed around the corners when you get it right, so that means it does get a better time than the Lamborghini Veneno, which has a 2 minute 3.746, then the Ferrari 288 GTO, a 2 minute 3.787. Ridiculously close between those two. I mean, that's only, well, that's only 0.4 tenths of a second, which is crazy. I mean, that is really close between those two, considering the Lamborghini has so much more power and is all-wheel drive. It doesn't actually pull away from the Ferrari that much. All the cars in this beat the Toyota GT86 and the go-karts. However, none of them beat the Ford Focus. However, I wasn't really expecting that. It's a rally car, so yeah, there we go. So anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.